Today, the Government and Economic Policy Committee, we have Tim Grayson, our Assemblyman from District 14, and he's going to address the impact fees and the effect that developer fees have on housing and whether it's crushing it or whether it can encourage it. I think he's put together a bill that's going to smooth out a lot of the conflicting policies and conflicting procedures around impact fees, and hopefully make it easier to build housing and affordable housing.
Very good. Am I ready to go, Tamara? And thank you for that. Melissa, good to see you. Kevin also. And Tamara, thank you so much for that very, very kind introduction. Glad to be with you all today. And I hope you're having a good afternoon at least, and a great afternoon if it's better for you. I do have priorities this year, as Tamara had mentioned in the introduction. Of course, impact fees would be one of those priorities. So I will talk about some of my priorities as well as impact fees, and then open it up, time permitting, for a bit of Q&A from the group that is signed on. Of course, housing and home ownership has been really a major focus of mine during my time in the Assembly, and I will tell you, this year is no exception at all. It's simple. High housing costs push Californians out of our state, and they force many businesses to have to consider moving as well, because of employees struggling to find affordable housing. And so when a business is struggling to find employees because employees can't afford to live, it then makes the workforce unaffordable for a business. And so this is all interconnected. There's no here at all. And so with that, I would like to throw just some amazing statistics out. Across California, more than 4 in 10 households have
that's stupid, I know,
housing costs, and exceeding 30% of their household income. More than 1 in 5 households statewide face severe housing cost burdens, spending more than half of their income on housing expenses. Now, this is equally troubling. California has one of the lowest home ownership rates in the nation, falling almost 10% below the national average. These numbers are actually even worse for Latinx and Black residents at 43% and 35% respectively. In fact, and this is a most egregious statistic, the rate of Black home ownership is lower today in California than it was in 1960, when racially based housing discrimination was actually legal. So the problem has unfortunately only gotten worse due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with many people unemployed, others moving out of expensive cities like San Francisco while they work from home. Housing costs have surged across the state, and we have experienced that in District 14, in Contra Costa and Solano counties. As a matter of fact, and I do want to state this, I am absolutely 100% supportive of affordable housing. We need to focus on affordable housing. In addition to that, we also need to focus on housing that is affordable. So we have affordable housing, and then when we're dealing with and talking about the homeless, having housing, it's not good enough to just throw a roof over a person's head, hand them a front door, and say, you're now housed, everything's going to be all right. With homelessness and dealing with that subject, and many of those that have come to homelessness, we need to not only provide housing, but housing with holistic or wraparound services. That I am supportive of. In addition to that, I'm supportive of housing that's affordable. I'll talk about that here in just 1 second. And the reason why I bring that up is the median price for a single family home in the state reached a new high of nearly $760,000 in March, actually $758,990. For example, right here in Contra Costa County, home prices have risen by nearly 25% over just the past year. All of this is exasperated by the fact that we simply are not building affordable priced housing quick enough. Back to Econ 101, supply, demand. So the California State Auditor recently revealed that local governments have given permits to build less than 1/5 of the housing low income of Californians need. So with that, that doesn't even cover the missing middle. That's the housing that's affordable dynamic that I was talking about earlier. We are at a place where the demand is growing at a much higher rate than what supply is coming on for the market. So without creative solutions to meet housing needs at all income levels, like low-rise multifamily development or mixed-use housing, transit-oriented development, the state really leaves working-class families behind. So I have introduced bills this year to help turn the tide in our housing affordability crisis. And I'd like to talk now just a little bit about the priority bills that I have. One in particular, which addresses how local governments pay for the cost associated with building new housing through it. And because of the unique property tax situation that's in California, locals often have to rely on housing impact fees to cover costs for infrastructure services. I absolutely get that. We understand that with development comes cost to local municipalities and cities, counties. So we understand the need for impact fees. And as you know, I was previously a city council member and mayor right here in Concord. And from personal, I do understand in many cases where these fees are not only appropriate, they're absolutely necessary. But I've also been that contractor on the other side of the conversation. And by the way, I still hold an active contractor's license. From my experience on that level, I've seen the way in which impact fees can raise the cost of housing, stopping development right in its tracks and pricing working families right out of the market. So I knew that impact fees were an issue that I wanted to tackle, but I needed to make sure that we went about solving it in the right way. So over the last year, I have convened 4 stakeholder roundtable meetings to discuss the challenge. Now, these groups included local governments, affordable developers, special districts, and utility companies. The year prior to last year, I actually went on a statewide tour with staff, and we toured major cities and brought in stakeholders, the same group that we've been having the working group comprised of, and hearing them from up and down the state, Bay Area, all the way down to San Diego. We really learned some very, very important things from those conversations. For example, developers raised the issue that exorbitant or uncertain fees can be the difference between a project moving forward or not. This is especially true for affordable developers who do not have that same flexibility or resources as private developers. We also heard some pretty striking stories of cities where the fees have reached 17% of the development cost, which means that the purchase of that living unit, 17% of it is attributed to just impact fees alone. So 17% is simply not workable. Impact fees like this can actually raise the cost of building housing so high that homes become impossible to afford for working families, that missing middle. And if they don't stop housing development altogether by those high cost impact fees. So I'm working on a bill to address that issue. And currently there's no statutory guidance or a set of consistent practices to determine the amount of impact fees. So AB 602 will provide clarity to the studies that local jurisdictions must use in order to determine how high impact fees should be. This will help ensure that fees are being levied appropriately across the state. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's more addressing the formula for each municipality and how they implement that formula and how they come up with their fee schedule. So this change will significantly cut down the cost to build and buy homes in California. And then while we've been doing a lot of work on the housing front for the past few years, it's clear that we still have a lot more work to do, and this is only one leg of the stool. In response to the concerns that the legislature is failing to effectively and quickly address the housing crisis, I am very excited to share with all of you that I am currently working on convening a task force, a working group of legislators to tackle housing affordability here in California. So this task force is it's a work in progress. It's being assembled as we speak. We are scheduling meetings, and we will be going on a statewide tour again, addressing issues and getting even further into the weeds and doing everything we can to make sure that California does the right action, makes the right policy, and gets back to a place where California is affordable to live, which means it has an affordable workforce, which means it can now become an affordable place to actually have your own business and run your business. Another thing that I want to point out on this issue is that housing, jobs, economic development, they all go hand in hand. And people want to live in an area with a vibrant and growing economy, and trying to create that environment where people can live, work, and play all within the same vicinity. People want to work in areas where they can afford to buy homes and start families. So could you imagine the economic activity that we could unlock if we simply got housing prices under control in California? So on that note, another priority that I would like to share with you is about economic transition to a green economy in Contra Costa County. And as you know, the Bay Area is home to the second largest oil refining center on the West Coast, 5 refineries. 4 of those are located in Contra Costa County. And in light of the governor's most recent executive orders, the potential for the loss of thousands of good paying union jobs is it is imperative that a transition to clean energy technology become a priority for federal, state, and even local stakeholders. So this year, I will be working to create what I call the Green Empowerment Zone. It is for Contra Costa County and a small portion of Solano County to prioritize access to tax incentives, grants, loan programs, workforce training programs, and private sector investment in the clean and green energy sector. I'm very, very excited, extremely excited about this effort, and I've been in contact and conversations, and also now partnering with Congressman DeSagne, Congressman Thompson, local leaders, stakeholders on this very important issue. So the reality is that we've seen what an economic transition without a plan looks like. It existed when the coal economy dropped out of West Virginia, and I don't think any of us want to see that repeated here in Contra Costa. So as the state transitions to clean fuels and high-tech energy, it is a matter of equity and economic justice. We hear a lot about a lot of folks wanting to talk about environmental justice. Absolutely supported, 100% behind environmental justice. But we also must make a part of that conversation economic justice and equity justice, that we support the growth of good paying jobs and industry to replace the ones that are being phased out. So the Green Empowerment Zone created by my bill AB 844 will set an example for the state, become a pilot for the state to show how we can make the transition smoothly. So I, as a small business owner myself, I understand how integral jobs are, how businesses are to supporting home ownership, transitioning to clean energy, and encouraging our economies, our communities and economy to prosper. So as I said earlier, housing, jobs, and economic development really go hand in hand. And if I may include education into that group, and that is why I'm continually grateful for the really good work that you all do as a chamber, reaching into the community, finding out what the needs are, communicating, reaching out to your representatives, local as state and federal, to make sure that we're aware of the challenges that you're facing as rank and file, front and center, and being mostly impacted by the economy that we're in right now. So those are my priorities for the year, and likely actually for the next several years, if I speak optimistically. And I know I've shared a lot in a really short time. I talk really fast, so I'd like to hand it back to the chamber and to open up the floor for any questions you might have. And again, thank you very, very much for the invite, Tamara.
Great, thank you. We have a couple people with our hands up, so we'll go ahead and we'll call on you if you don't mind unmuting yourselves, and then you can ask your question. Palo, do you want to go first?
Yes, Assemblyman Grayson, so thank you for being here. I appreciate it. So a couple of things that were obvious by absent were the biggest problem. So just as a background, I sit on the Measure X advisory board. I'm one of the voting members. And so we're trying to wrestle with the priorities for the money for Contra Costa County. So it's $100 million plus or minus. And we are, let's see, are we doing a gallery? Ah, there we go, gallery view. So we are wrestling with the same kinds of things that you're wrestling with to give the priorities to the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors. So one of the things that I hear a lot about is NIMBY, not in my backyard. Didn't hear you talk about that at all. That drives a lot of the shortages of the housing in the area, which creates a whole shortage. The other thing that that nobody's talking about, that I hear you talking about, is that Proposition 13 has changed everything. So prior to Proposition 13, for those that haven't been around for very long, 1978, that law came into effect and basically capped what property taxes can be for homeowners. Prior to Proposition 13, 60% of all taxes came from businesses. We're talking giant corporate B of A's, all that kind of stuff. Now it's 60% from homeowners, which is a smaller total dollar value. So ever since 1978, and I pay attention a lot to politics, and I heard it in your talk today, is there's always trying to find developer fees. There were no developer fees before 1978. So that is one example of how to get around Proposition 13 to raise money. And they're never going to fix it with that kind of thing, with the developer fees. It's just not going to work because there's just not enough. That's too expensive. The other thing I wanted to say is that if anybody wants to go to spur.org, I urge you to go to spur.org, and they talk about housing, transportation, how it all comes together. And one of the interesting things about Spur is that in the East Coast, much higher, and I'm from Boston, I lived in Boston for a number of years, so much higher density of housing than there is here in California. Now I understand when you move into a neighborhood, when I move into a neighborhood, ubiquitous you think that your neighborhood is going to stay the same forever. That's just not the case. So when I ask people, I said, before you moved in and bought your new home, what do you think the people that lived here before, what do you think they were saying about you coming in here? So there's always going to be change. And I don't hear anything about, we just had this law.
Hey, Pele, do you have a question in there? Do you have a quick question in there? A question?
Actually, no. My feeling is, yeah, here's the question. What are you going to do about NIMBY? What are you going to do about Prop 13? Because I don't hear, that's the real problem with everything you're talking about. What are you going to do about that? How's that going to work for you? I don't think it's an answer. It's rhetorical.
No, it's fine. Thank you so much.
Time.
I was actually going to say, what he said. And so as my response, and you bring up some really phenomenal points.
Right.
And an old phrase that says, be careful what you ask for. And there was this purpose behind Prop 13. And that purpose was to try to curb the high taxation that was happening on property taxes. However, what the cities did, they simply said, fine, we won't go to the voters anymore to try to raise the revenue that we need. We'll just change the name and call it a fee instead of a tax. And so what we did in response to that, what government did was we said, okay, cities, you can charge a fee now, but you can only charge a fee for cost recovery. Now, this is the problem with developing, and I'll give you, Kevin, if I have enough time, I'd like to give you I'd like to give you a personal example. As a contractor, literally, just a few years before I got on the Concord City Council, doing a project in a city, I won't name the city, but doing a project in a city, it had different phases to it. The first phase of that project, I was required to widen a public road the entire length of my property, install sidewalks, and that was a part of what I would do for being allowed to develop in the city. When we went to the next phase to build the next phase out, they charged me an impact fee for the cost that it would take them to widen the road and pay for a sidewalk. And I said, I already paid for that. And they said, sorry, that's our fee schedule and that's what you owe. So I ended up actually doing the work, paying for the work, and then turning around in the second phase and paying for the work again. This is what I'm after. I'm going after this. So what we did was we created a storm when it comes to fees. So we are addressing, and I by all means am not trying to take fees away from the city, because there are legitimate uses for fees if it is for cost recovery and if it is for the real purpose that can be directly related and correlated to that particular project, which is what my bill calls for. I can't be charged a development fee to pay for something 5 miles away that has absolutely nothing to do with my project. And so with that, we will continue to work. I'm not here to break the back of municipalities and ultimately create unintended consequences. However, I am here to make sure that we get affordability back in our communities. We are going to have to address taxation in the state, whether it be how we tax goods, how we tax property. All that needs to be reformed at some point in time. And NIMBYs, they shall always be with us, but we also have YIMBYs who are coming on board. And so with that, we just need a really strong YIMBY voice for every NIMBY voice that we hear.
Thanks.
So thank you. Phelan.
Thank you. Bob, you had your hand up next.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks to the Concord Chamber for hosting, and thanks, Tim, for spending some time with us this afternoon. Bob Brown with Western States Petroleum Association. Appreciate your call out of the thousands of refinery workers in the county and a little bit in Solano as well. But my question was really around the budget, since it's topical and timely. I mean, the big budget bill was passed yesterday, but a lot of the work is now going to come through details through the trailer bills. And we noted that there was $3.7 billion in there for to be spent on ZEVs and zero emission vehicles, and $4 billion on climate resiliency. Just wondering if you have any line of sight on kind of the timing of that and what that may look like, how that's going to play out.
Well, great question. And I think that we can look toward the executive orders that the governor has already put into place as far as what intent language would look like, what actions they're going to build these actions around those executive orders of deadlines of 2030, 2035, 2040, as we start facing them. I think the other thing that is becoming more and more a part of the conversation, which is very encouraging, Bob, for all of us, is the fact that there has been this super strong push for us to electrify everything and put literally all of our eggs into one basket. And now there appears to be, and I'm glad for this, it appears to be that there is conversation that is starting to happen around the option of all the above. In other words, there are, I don't know how many of you would feel comfortable getting on a plane that was plugged in all night, and then you're going to fly across the country in a plane that was charged up overnight.
That's dangerous.
I would be a little nervous about that. So we are looking at different options, and options that are renewable fuels, renewable jet fuel, renewable diesel, and things where possibly electrification and that technology isn't quite there yet. But just because it's not there doesn't mean we don't continue to move toward greener and cleaner energy. We have renewables that we can turn to. So with that, I think the budget and its conversation and timelines are going to be dictated on those extraordinary conversations that we have around the use of hydrogen or around the use of bio and renewable diesel and renewable jet fuels. And as far as go, I think now the momentum has started to really catch hold and get ground as far as EVs. And I think it's becoming even more market driven than it is political driven at this point, especially here in California, because we're so far ahead of the game from everyone else in the nation. So it'll be interesting to see what the market does in the next 2 or 3 years for EVs.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Yes. Ken, or I'm sorry, whoever's.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Go for it, Melissa.
Kevin, do you want to go ahead then?
Yeah. Hey, thank you as always for being on this call. It's real beneficial to all of us to hear it straight from you. It seems like the housing shortage in California has been a decade old, if not longer. So kind of what is the time frame, if any, when things are going to kind of move forward and let's start putting some sticks in the air? I was just all over California, Northern California, this last 5 days on my motorcycle, and there wasn't a whole lot of construction anywhere that I could see. Now, I didn't see everything, that's a fact, but is there any type of timeline when things are going to move at a faster pace? I mean, I know that's a rough one, but.
Kevin, if you're riding your motorcycle, you shouldn't be riding where there's sticks coming up out of the ground.
Well,
you need to go relax and ride in a good place. And I'll ride
in the ground.
You make a great observation that this is actually decades in the making, and it's because of poor policy that was not clearly thought out, and I mean this from the local level through the strategic use of zoning laws and things of that sort, all the way to state level. And in no way am I trying to throw my previous colleague or those in the legislature under the bus. It's just a lot of times we like to make policy and push it out there, and we don't stop and take the time to think about unintended consequences. So Kevin, actually what you do is you actually make an observation from something you can't see, and none of us can see it, but developers know it. And that is this: land banking is at an all-time low in the state of California. And when we saw that indicator decades ago, when people were no longer investing in California land, we should have seen then that our housing is in trouble. And we should have started making housing policies back then that would have been pro-production. There are 3 P's that we're looking at here: production, protection, and preservation. We've worked really hard in the past couple of years on protection. We have worked some on preservation. We really need to focus right now on production. And the only way to do that is to actually face the music of what we've done in the past and realize that we have hurt ourselves. and go back and actually talk to the people that are rank and file, front and center on the ground in the housing market, and say what needs to happen for us to not just get one particular type of housing built, but how do we build all levels of housing? The reason why I say that, Kevin, is because if we don't build middle rate housing, and if we don't build high-end executive housing, then we create a glut at the bottom and there's no upflow. What we need to do is make sure that when we build, we're very balanced. We build across the board in all markets so that it creates an upflow. And when you create that upflow where people now sell what they have and upgrade to the next level, it creates that, and it draws in at the entry level. And that's where we get our new home buyers, our first time home buyers. And that's what starts building and growing a strong economy.
Yeah, and I've seen that happen. I'm just wondering, you know, are those conversations happening now to move it forward? That's
my bill's about, and that's what
all right.
statewide tours are. That's what the working group is about.
Cool, man. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Satinder, you there? I saw your hand up.
Yes. Hi, Tim. Good afternoon. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to thank you. So Satinder Malhi here on behalf of Cal State East Bay, and just kind of picking up on something that Bob referenced earlier. It is budget season, and we do know that there is a sort of a placeholder budget, if you will. And I know that there are still some very important outstanding details that are needing to get hashed out. I was just wondering if you might be able to provide us with a quick summary as to what those specific issues are. Where are the specific areas that are needing to get worked out between the administration and the legislature? And what do you see as sort of the timeline from here on out for over the next week or two? Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be frantic. Absolutely all hands on deck for the next 10 days. The governor has 10 days to sign the approved budget that the legislature has sent to his desk. And I'm hoping that somebody went in and stole all of his red pens. And so he can't redline anything in the budget. I believe right now, anybody that thought that they had it together in the budget, I hope they realize that the work is not finished. That if you have ever advocated, you've got to advocate now, whether you're in the industry, transportation industry, infrastructure, whether you're in housing or whether you're in education. Now is the time to really make sure you get a hold of budget chairs, both on the Senate and the Assembly, and make sure that they are, because we came to an agreement. The two houses came to an agreement, a strong, solid agreement, but make sure they hold strong because the administration is going to push back. And they have some agendas of their own that they want to push. However, I can tell you this, Satinder, I have not heard of any kickback coming from any education proposal, which is good news. Because if there's one thing California has stayed strong in, that's education, and we must continue to build on our education. When I say education, I mean higher education. We're still struggling horribly on K through 12, but on higher education, we have always been prominent globally, and so we need to continue to keep that going. So with that, I would say right now, I wouldn't stop advocating, just like you weren't, just like you were advocating for the budget when you thought it was all going to be in there. It's a different strategy this year. They've chosen to create a shell and leave the specifics for trailer bills, which makes me a little nervous.
Right. Well, I just wanted to say we at Cal State definitely appreciate all of your continued support for the CSU, particularly this year. And we always appreciate you being so open and accessible to us. So thank you very much.
You all are great partners. And I think Cal State East Bay is a tremendous asset for all of us. You all do such a great job in the East Bay.
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a couple people with their hands up, so I'm just going to read the order. We'll do Carolina, then Brian, then Pam, and then Tamara. So Carolina, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, good afternoon, or everyone. Carolina Herrera with Kaiser Permanente. So I actually kind of want to just hop on board and echo what Satinder just said. We owe you a debt of gratitude. Kaiser Permanente and some of the other partners here in healthcare were really concerned about AB 650 earlier this year, which would have required us to do some hazard pay. And we're really thankful for you and your leadership and your office for being open to meeting with us and coalition members, because I think that's a true testament to your understanding of both sides of the story and really taking the time to hear us out. So we're hoping that although it's a 2-year bill, it will not advance any further. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for that acknowledgement as well. Again, that goes back to unintended consequences. And by the way, I think this would be a great time to just give acknowledgement and recognition to all of our first responders and frontline workers in the medical field for all that you did for us in the community during this past year and a half. You all are to be commended and rewarded in some way, shape, or form. So thank you for all you've done.
Thanks. Brian.
Thank you. I put it in the headset. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Outstanding. Good. Thanks. Tim, really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Giving us time away from your busy day is a big deal. In mentioning the new budget that's coming out, the process that's happening right now, my main concern is, and I'm living out here in Antioch, Brentwood area, we have a lot of new construction happening out here. We have hundreds and hundreds of new single family homes coming in out here to take advantage of the incredible home prices in California. Not a lot of multifamily happening. But nonetheless, infrastructure is being taxed yet further beyond its already overstretched limits. I'm curious if there is anything in the new budget that is intended to deal with that issue. I'll give you Highway 4 as the prime example. Traveling from here to Concord in the morning when I first moved out here took about 12, 13 minutes. Now it's almost 40. It's just insane. Is anything happening to beef up infrastructure to handle the overcrowding that's being built into these new developments?
Great question. And I think there's this balance or dance that's happening right now between the state government and what is being done on the federal level with infrastructure. We have gone several years now without a lot of assistance from the federal government toward California. And I think that was to be expected. Now that we have the administration in place in Washington that is there, I believe we now have better opportunities for, as a matter of fact, California just scraped back $1 billion for the project for transportation infrastructure in the valley. So I think what they're trying to do is figure out how far can we stretch our California dollar to meet needs and then turn around and depend on a federal infrastructure bill or budget that would funnel in much needed money for our infrastructure here. I think the other thing that is interesting is the tactic that is being used this year with trailer bills. And I do know that conversation is happening around infrastructure. I think you reaching out and saying what you did today can give me my marching orders to go in and especially have a conversation with Assemblymember Frazier to make sure that in those infrastructure dollars that are in the budget, that we can try to pull some of that for the East Bay. And especially where it's really exponentially, where people are actually willing to build housing. If you're willing to build housing, then you deserve some infrastructure money to be able to support that housing.
And hopefully it doesn't come from Melrose.
Yes, absolutely. And I would also like to state this, that if a community is going to build housing in the magnitude that I see out in the far East Bay, I think it's incumbent upon those local agencies, cities, and even the county to make sure that they include in that building, like follow follow the example of what the city council has done for the Concord Naval Weapons Station. We won't talk about the timing of it because that's been atrocious. But what we can do is talk about the actual design of it, because they designed it for over 12,000 living units, but they weren't content with just becoming a bedroom community to house the workforce of San Francisco. They also included in it over 6 million square feet of commercial space. They have light industry included so that they can actually create a community where people can live, work, and play all in the same area. So if they're going to build volumes of housing out in the Far East Bay, I think it's incumbent on local agencies to also serve their constituents by building a workforce community center, or a place where jobs can locate, and industry and companies and business can locate where the housing is.
Your lips to God's ears, in this case, God, of course, being the legislature.
Oh, they only wish. They do act like it sometimes.
Pam, you had your hand up next.
I did. So I am so appreciative of you being here. There's some wonderful things going on in Contra Costa County, and I'm very appreciative of that. I'm totally supportive of affordable housing. I'm also supportive of people going to work.
Yes.
And what I'm experiencing is some of my clients are moving out of California who are working because they cannot afford to live here. But I also hear across the board, people cannot find help. Where are these people who want to work, who are going to, support the new housing? It's like, where are they? I've been searching for someone for 2 months. It's like, it's crazy. There's a correlation there.
Wow, there's a lot of thought around your observation
I'm sure.
and your experience. I think we are really stretched on a workforce right now that is strained, that is still suffering from, you know what? Someone was talking earlier a lot about, I don't hear this being talked about. I don't hear this being talked about. And there's something that I don't hear being talked about, and that is the mental health impact that has touched every one of us through this COVID period and this last year and 4 months. What I mean by that is that whether it was through the loss of a job or whether it was through policies, and being sequestered to your house.
Yeah.
And every one of us have been impacted in mental health. And I think we are looking at a workforce right now that has the immobilized workforce that is still suffering. And then at the same time, not quite finding themselves in a position yet where they need to get out and work for money. And that needs to change.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
You, Tamara.
Hi, Tim. I'm getting back to the impact fees on your legislation. It sounds like smoothing out and consolidating a lot of these regulations and policies, conflicting policies. What kind of an impact is that going to have? Is that revenue neutral, or will there be savings provided to the developers? And if that's the case, where's the shortfall going to come from between the tax revenue that's produced by property taxes and the need that keeps growing with impact fees? I'm thinking these contract fire now.
Yes, I hear you. I'm going to speak to you first of all, from a policymaker, and then I'll talk to you from a developer perspective. Mm-hmm. From a policymaker, initially, it looks like things are going to, you're going to see a decrease in revenue, especially if you're the bad actor that's charging 17% in impact fees. Of course, you're going to see a decrease in revenue in that area. However, I have learned through the working group and the statewide tour for 2 years in a row that in some cases, impact fees were actually regulating the type of housing that was being built so we could dictate who lives in our community and has access to living in our community and who doesn't. And so I'm not sure really if it's a bad thing that those impact fees are being impacted. On the other side of it, I think it's from a developer's standpoint. So go back to the policymaker. So what I'm trying to do, because I really do understand how integral impact fees are to keeping up infrastructure. And by the way, as a business community, you want your infrastructure to be in good shape in your city, because without good streets and without good sidewalks, it's hard to do good business unless you're totally online and virtual. But even then, you've got to have somebody come pick up your product and ship it out. So you've got to have good infrastructure. So because of that, I am trying to build in that if a developer or if a city partners with a developer that is building a much needed segment of housing, for instance, affordable housing, to be able to lift up its community, then I'm trying to make sure that we have the means on the state end to backfill whatever that state would have lost in partnership with that developer. So I am trying to make sure that we do keep local municipalities whole. But those are for good actors. Those are for folks that are genuinely partnering with developers to get the right housing into their community. And I'll work, I promise you, I'll spend my entire career that I have, what little is left up here, fighting and advocating that we backfill and we make sure we keep our local municipalities whole and keep that infrastructure where it needs to be, and without impacting the budget of those cities. Now, on the developer side, it just doesn't make sense because it doesn't pass the smell test. Why would a local municipality want to keep a property completely vacant and empty for over 2 decades and not develop it? You're not getting near the value of that simply because their impact fees are exorbitant. If I was that, it's called making a good business decision. That's why you all have sales in your retail businesses. Wouldn't it only make sense to discount a one-time fee so that you could look at it as an investment to develop that property and increase the tax revenue off that property exponentially in perpetuity? And so from a developer's point of view and lens, it only makes sense that a local municipality would want to have that property developed with the right type of development as soon as they could, because then they get much more off of that property as far as value.
Thank you. And then this will be our last question. We want to be respectful of the Assembly members' time. Eddie?
Thank you. Full disclosure to the rest, I am the city council person for Concord for the last 8 years, and I served with Assemblymember Grayson for 4 of those?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm concerned about the impact fees in the fact that we do have an impact, and as you noted, when we put in a major things down the road happen. I was very interested in Brian's comment about Brentwood and Highway 4, because there's an impact fee. Brentwood in 1990 was 6,000 people. 10 years later, it was 36,000. 10 years later, it was 56,000. And suddenly, Concord is saying, well, you guys are putting too many people on Highway 4. Hell, in 1990, we didn't have a problem on Highway 4. But in a mini section, the same thing happens in the city. And I was concerned about when you mentioned, 5 miles impact, because sometimes we'll have something going on downtown, but the impact is actually where Ignacio Road hits Clayton Road, because the people that are coming to that place are going to be going down Kirkham Pass and Ignacio. How do you, as a legislature, structure the bill so that we in the city know what the exact details are in regard to the impact fee? I don't want to have, some poor church person who has been working on his driveway fix his driveway and the sidewalk that's attached, and then wind up having to get billed for it again. That's not where I'm at. But I need specific guidelines in your bill, all right? So I know what I'm doing. And can you guarantee me that you're going to do this?
How is it that local agencies are not involved in the process anyway?
That's because he's telling me that he, the big bad state, is going to dictate what the impact fees are, or
Now,
where they're.
If that was not the most inaccurate, if that was not the most inaccurate statement of this whole
Okay.
meeting, I don't know what was, because no way, shape, and form does my bill dictate what an impact fee is going to be. As a matter of fact,
That's what I want to know.
I think I very clearly said, Mr. Brisson, that it is not a one size fits all, that it provides a formula, it provides a means and a way for a local municipality to be able to determine what that impact fee is that's going to be reasonable.
Okay.
And you, at the very beginning, you brought up and you said, impact fees are to help cover something. There's going to be impact down the road. Now, wait a minute. The impact of that development, that developer, yes, is on the hook for how are we going to afford new sewer line? How are we going to afford new water lines? Special districts are famous for doing this. And they say, well, we need to charge you not only for the installation of a new sewer line, we need to charge you because 30 years from now, we're going to have to replace that sewer line. Wait a minute. Isn't that person the taxpayer for the next 30 years? Aren't they paying property tax for the next 30 years to help pay for that next new sewer line? Why should they have to pay an exorbitant impact fee up front for the future when they are going to be paying for that every year in their property tax and in that development? So with that, I'm not asking for impact fees to be removed. And
Okay.
I'm not asking for there to be a loss of local control. I support local control, and I think local control and only the community knows what their needs are. They need to be able to figure out what that reasonable price is. And all I'm asking for is for local municipalities to be able to justify their impact fees. I don't believe a local municipality in California can possibly justify 17% impact fees. That means when you buy that house, 17% of the cost of that house was in nothing but an impact fee.
Well, okay. My point is, I just want to make sure that you get details, because I got to sit down and I've got to do it. Actually, I can think of, oddly enough, not in so much the urban areas or the suburban. I can see that in the rural areas having a very high impact, because if they have to run a water line up to Neverland, or at the same time, they got to figure how the hell are we going to get the fire trucks up there?
Which is exactly why I don't want to be prescriptive and tell you what your impact fee is going to be.
No,
I would say, here's the formula.
That's what I want to make sure.
And you guys justify. I just want you to justify and make sure that it's reasonable and it is affordable for the state of California, and especially us trying to get out of a housing crisis. Okay. I really appreciate you, Eddie. Thank you very much.
And I appreciate if you bring in the cities to actually work on the formula.
And by the way, Eddie, the cities brought in, they were brought in 2 years ago when my statewide tour took place, and the cities have been a part of my working group every single meeting.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, as the last person, have a great day.
Thank you again, Assemblymember Grayson, for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time to speak to our group. And this recording will be available. So if there's something that someone missed, we'll send it out so you can go back and catch it again. And then, of course, we'll send out the contact list. So if you do have questions, representatives from Assemblymember Grayson's office is on here, and they'd be more than happy to reach out to you as well. And of course, the Assemblymember himself. To give you guys just a heads up on what we have coming up this Thursday, we do have a mixer, and something that the Assemblymember mentioned earlier on in the presentation was about renewable energies. We do have a presentation from Marathon Petroleum on July 13th about their transition to renewable fuel. So that'll be a lot of great information as well to hear what our local refineries have going on. And with that, it's 5 o'clock. We appreciate you taking time out of your days to come listen to the presentation, and we hope to see everyone soon. Thank you, everyone.